Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. Robert Shore-Goss. I am the senior pastor of MCC in the Valley. I am a former Jesuit Catholic priest, and I hold a doctorate from Harvard in comparative religion and Christian theology. I am a queer theologian, well published. I want to talk about certainly the issue of homosexuality in the Bible. And I am not neutral because I am gay. I am a pastor to a church that is gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, and heterosexual. In other words, an inclusive community of faith. I want to start off with Peter Gomes, who's the chaplain at Harvard, in his book, The Good Book. He says, "No credible case against homosexuality or homosexuals can be made from the Bible unless one chooses to read the scriptures in a way that sustains existing prejudice against homosexuality and homosexuals. The problem, of course, is not the Bible. It is the Christians who read it." I want to talk about this by first giving some background information. I anticipate breaking this up into 4 segments. Today on Leviticus verses, the next one on Sodom and Gomorrah, the third on Paul and homosexuality, and the fourth on what Jesus might have said about homoerotic relations. The first thing is, it's a mistake to identify the modern concept of homosexuality as understood by the Bible. Homosexuality is a term that was coined in 1870 in German psychiatric practice as the moribund sexual passion for the same sex, along with the word heterosexuality was coined as a pathological term, being the moribund sexual passion for the opposite sex. The issue is that heterosexuality has been rehabilitated, but homosexuality has not in the 20th century, and now going into the 21st century with many Christians. I want to say this because certainly if we describe Paul as a closeted homosexual, Paul would never have thought of himself as a homosexual. If we describe the disciple Peter, who was married, as heterosexual, that escaped him because he would not understand what heterosexual meant, or bisexual in the ancient world. So I certainly want to raise that. The next point I want to talk about is how did the ancient world understand sexuality? And the first thing to say is that sexuality is understood as the relationship between a penetrator and penetratee. I call it the cult of the penetrator. Relationships are never equal in sexuality. They're always asymmetrical in power, which means that there's always a power differential between the person who penetrates and the person who's penetrated. In the ancient world, the top, if you will, is the penetrator. It is a male who penetrates women, who penetrates slaves, or lesser males, or youth. And so certainly we have to understand that sexuality is understood in very different terms in the biblical world from the world today of same-sex relationships or even heterosexual relationships and love and consenting adults. I want to say that the Bible has been used to justify slavery, gender oppression, anti-Semitism, colonial domination of the Americas, Asia, and Africa, environmental exploitation, and sexual orientation oppression, and those who are gender different, it has been oppressive to. So there's a long list of how the Bible has been used, and in a very violent way, which is basically to misappropriate the usage of the Bible as a word of grace for a word of violence and oppression. The reason I'm doing this is because there has to be alternative voices to the toxic Christianity that is spewed about the Bible and homosexuality. I want to start talking about Leviticus 18:22 and 20:13. You shall not lie with a male as with a woman, it is an abomination. And in the latter verse, if a man lies with a male as with a woman, both of them have committed an abomination, and they shall be put to death. Their blood is upon them. This appears in the Holiness Code of the book of Leviticus. And let me start off with an interpretation by the foremost Jewish biblical scholar, Dr. Jacob Milgrom, who's written a 3-volume work on Leviticus. He says, I got some good news and some bad news. He said, the good news, if you are a Gentile, male, gay male, or lesbian, it's not applicable to you. If you are a Jewish male or lesbian living outside of Israel, it's not applicable to you. If you're a lesbian, period, it's not applicable to you. It is only applicable to Jewish males residing in Israel. You start off with chapter 18, and it starts off, you shall not do as they do in the land of Egypt, where you live, and you shall not do in the land of Canaan, to which I am bringing to you. And there's a whole list in chapter 18 of do nots, which will result in the loss of the land. If you ask the question, what is this text about? The first thing is, we have to ask, what are the sexual acts that we're talking about? In the first place, in the Jewish tradition, the Orthodox do not believe lesbians can have sex together, because they only understand sex as penetrative sex. In terms of this biblical passage, it is not referring to masturbation or oral sex. It is not referring to intercrural sex, which is rubbing between thighs. It is referring to anal intercourse. And if we look at the idiom, lying as if you were a female, it really refers to the passive position. And the issue at hand is, certainly the issue is a betrayal of your male status to be penetrated by another male. So it has to do with a gender issue. A culture that defines maleness and femaleness very distinctively. For a male to take on the position of a female and be penetrated is to betray your status as a male. And that is what is called an abomination. Now, the second point is abomination is a word applied to ritual purity. And we have to take it out of that context and not put it in the context of a horrendous crime, because there were many abominations that included the eating of shellfish and other things that we do that are prescription, which you can cleanse yourself of that impurity. So abomination is a ritual impurity term. Now, in terms of this, I want to say that the verse itself, Jacob Milgram and his student David Stewart have suggested that the real issue here is male-to-male incest. And certainly, if that's the case, the use of these verses are certainly problematic, because I know of no same-sex male couples that are in an incestuous relationship. So therefore, it's inapplicable to quote this out of context and apply it to consensual same-sex relationships. Secondly, David Boyarin, who is the foremost Orthodox Talmudic scholar at the University of California at Berkeley, he talks about this. And he says, the penetration of a male constituted a consignment of him to a class of females, a degradation of status. This constituted a sort of mixing of kinds, a general taboo occurrence in Hebrew culture. He goes on to say, abomination indicates a crossing of a body from one God-given category to another, analogous to cross-dressing. So the issue is here, there is a mixing and crossing over genders. Male-to-male intercourse mixes gender roles by relegating one partner to the role of the receptive woman. So the issue is not sexuality per se, it is the issue of breaking a gender concept. And certainly we do not have the same gender concepts that is in the biblical Hebrew world. We do not believe that women are sexual property owned by their husbands. So certainly there are some real gender differences. We believe that there is gender equality between husband and wife. We believe in equality between partners, same-sex partners. So therefore, in this text, it cannot be applied to anything. I also want to point out that those extreme Christians who call for the death penalty, we cannot find anything in Jewish history to sustain that the rabbis ever condemned someone for same-sex relationships and applied the death penalty. They always found loopholes to prevent the death penalty applied to same-sex individuals. I wish the Christian tradition and history did the same, but unfortunately we have the history of violence and violence murder against gay men all through history, and in particular the lethal violence done in our society, justified by religion, to kill folks like Matthew Shepard and other folks. We have been targeted by violence, and the text of the Bible has been moved from a text of grace to a text of violence. And that is not acceptable for any Christians and for the Christians who follow Christ, which is the way and path of nonviolence. Blessings on you.